My name is Celine Harper. And the night my husband raised a champagne glass and introduced his mistress at our 10th anniversary party. I didn't cry, I let him finish the speech. Because revenge is not interruption, it is timing. The house was glowing. That night, Fairview Heights, outside Denver. Modern glass walls, floating staircase, warm golden lighting spilling across the manicured lawn. Valet parking lined the driveway. Ethan loved spectacle. He said milestones should feel expansive. 10 years of marriage, 3 years in that house, 2 years of him slowly changing. I remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong. It wasn't lipstick on a collar. It wasn't late nights at the office. It was the way he stopped asking my opinion. We built Harper Design Group together, from a 2-person consultancy in our apartment to a 7-figure interior development firm. But 6 months before the party, Ethan started signing contracts without me, holding private meetings, opening new accounts. When I asked, he smiled softly. I'm protecting you from stress. I almost believed him. The anniversary party was his idea, catered live string quartet, 40 guests, investors, friends, clients, even my parents flew in. I wore a silver silk dress he once said was his favorite. He wore confidence like armor. At 9:17 p.m., he tapped his glass. The music stopped. 10 years. He began smiling at the crowd. 10 years of growth, ambition, and evolution. He looked at me briefly, then past me. And sometimes, he continued smoothly. Evolution means embracing change. A ripple of polite laughter. Then she stepped forward. Tall, blonde, red dress, young. He placed his hand at the small of her back. I'd like you all to meet someone important to my future, he said. The air shifted. This is Lila. The silence was surgical. Someone dropped a fork. My mother inhaled sharply behind me. Ethan smiled wider. Celine and I have grown in different directions. And while I will always respect what we built, it's time to move forward. He turned toward the crowd again. This house, he added lightly, will remain part of the Harper legacy. He had rehearsed that line. The house he thought he controlled. All eyes turned to me, waiting for tears, for a scene, for a collapse. Instead, I picked up my champagne glass and smiled. Ethan, I said clearly, that's a beautiful speech. He relaxed slightly, because he thought I was surrendering. But since we're sharing evolutions, I continued calmly, let's clarify something. The room froze. I walked toward the center of the room slowly. He shifted uneasily. He introduced Leela as your future, I said gently. That's fine. I turned toward the guests. But let's be precise about the present. I looked directly at him. You don't own this house? A murmur rippled through the room. Ethan blinked. What are you talking about? He laughed lightly. I kept my voice even. When we refinanced 18 months ago, you transferred the title into an LLC. Yes, he said confidently. And who signed as primary controlling member? I asked. He hesitated. I reached into the small clutch bag I was holding, pulled out a folded document, because I did. The silence deepened. I hold 51% controlling interest, I said calmly. You hold His smile faltered. That's not it, I replied. You said it was a tax strategy, I continued. You were distracted by expansion at the time. Lila stepped slightly away from him. The guests shifted uncomfortably. And since we're discussing legacies, I added softly, the company restructuring you signed last quarter. Same majority clause. His face strained. He looked at me like I had become a stranger. I walked toward the front door, opened it. The night air rushed in. Valet staff turned to look. I won't make a scene, I said evenly. This is still our anniversary. I met Leela. Eyes. You're welcome to stay. Then I looked back at Ethan. But you won't. The finality in my voice silenced everything. You have 30 minutes, I said calmly. to gather your personal belongings. His voice cracked. You're joking. No, I replied. This house, I said softly, is not part of the Harper legacy. It is mine. Asterisk, the music had stopped. The string quartet stood frozen, mid-dash note. No one moved. Ethan stared at me like I had pulled the floor out from under him. Celine, he said quietly, trying to regain control. This isn't the place. It's exactly the place, I replied. He had chosen the stage. I was simply finishing the script. Lila's confidence had evaporated. You told me everything was already settled, she whispered to him. It is, he snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. I walked toward the staircase and picked up a slim leather portfolio from the console table. I had prepared for this night, not emotionally, legally, before anyone leaves, I said clearly, addressing the guests. There's one more thing. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. Don't, he warned under his breath. I ignored him. When Ethan decided to move forward without me, I continued. He assumed I would react the way he would. He swallowed, impulsively. A few people exchanged glances, but when he started signing private contracts and shifting capital, I did what I've always done. I paused, I reviewed the numbers. 3 months before the party, I discovered he had opened a parallel development division. Using company assets without board approval. He assumed majority ownership meant unilateral authority. He forgot the majority had shifted. When we refinanced and restructured, I insisted on a protective clause for 1% controlling vote. He signed it without reading the implications, because he trusted himself, not me. Harper Design Group is no longer jointly directed, I said calmly. The room went still again. I filed formal documentation yesterday morning. As of 8:02 a.m., Ethan has been removed as acting executive director pending fiduciary review. His head snapped toward me. You what? The board meeting happened this afternoon, I replied evenly. You were busy planning tonight. His breathing quickened. You blindsided me. No, I said softly. You underestimated me. A client near the fireplace cleared his throat. Is this legitimate? He asked cautiously. Yes, I answered. The documentation has already been submitted to state records. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. You can't do this without cause. I can, I replied. And I did. Because the new division he opened, it was hemorrhaging money, speculative land purchases, unapproved contracts, leveraged against our core accounts. If it failed, it would have taken everything with it, including the house he thought he owned, including the legacy he thought he controlled, including me. Lila stepped back another inch. You said she didn't understand the business, she murmured. Ethan didn't answer because he see Uldeen single quotes. T did the numbers never lie, and neither do legal filings. I walked toward him slowly, not angry, not shaking, just steady. You wanted a new future, I said quietly. That's fine, but you don't get to rewrite the foundation and pretend I didn't pour the concrete. He looked around the room desperately. His investors were silent. His friends avoided eye contact. His performance had collapsed and there was no applause this time. You have 30 minutes, I repeated calmly. And after that, he stared at me, voice raw. After that, I said, security changes the locks. The guests began leaving quietly. Some murmured apologies. Some offered subtle nods of respect. The ballet line shortened. The string quartet packed up in silence. Lila picked up her purse slowly. I didn't know, she said softly to me. I believe you, I replied. She looked at Ethan, then back at me, and she walked out alone. 20-8 minutes later. Ethan stood at the base of the staircase with a small suitcase. He looked smaller, somehow less sharp, less certain. You're destroying everything, he said quietly. No, I replied. I'm preserving it. He searched my face. For what? He asked bitterly. For stability, I said. For the people who built this with us. For the life you were willing to gamble. He shook his head. You'll regret this. I stepped closer. So will you. He walked out the front door. At exactly 9:47 p.m., the same door he stood beside while announcing his future. The house felt different immediately, quieter, stronger, owned. But that wasn't the real ending. The real ending came 3 months later. Harper Design Group stabilized quickly. Under singular leadership, we cut speculative ventures, reinforced contracts, expanded into high-end hospitality. Design instead of risque land development, revenue climbed steadily. Investors regained confidence. The company thrived. Without chaos, without ego, without him. Ethan attempted to launch his own firm with the new division, but without capital control. It collapsed within months. His name lost weight in the market. Reputation matters in Denver's business circles, and public humiliation travels fast. One afternoon, I received a call from a mutual acquaintance. He's struggling, they said. Gently, I listened quietly. I did not celebrate. I did not gloat. I simply absorbed the symmetry. He wanted evolution. He got isolation. 6 months after the anniversary party, I hosted another gathering. Same house, same driveway, but no spectacle, no string quartet, just close clients and partners. At 9:17 p.m., I raised my glass. To growth, I said calmly, to clarity and to reading the fine print. Soft laughter rippled warmly this time. Genuine, earned, someone asked. If I ever regretted how it unfolded, I thought about it carefully. I regret that he thought I was temporary, I said. But I don't regret proving I wasn't. Later that night, I stood alone on the balcony, the Denver skyline glowing softly in the distance, cold air brushing against my shoulders, the house lights warm behind me. 10 years of marriage ended in 30 minutes. But partnership isn't erased by betrayal. It is redefined by boundaries. Asterisk. He introduced his future. I reclaimed my present, and when the doors closed behind him, I understood something clearly. A man can make a speech, but a woman who owns the house controls the ending. Asterisk. He brought a replacement to my anniversary. I removed him from my foundation.